Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Our presentation is on leveraging library services to bridge the access to justice gap. My name is Laura Francabandera. I am the Adult Services Supervisor at the Maricopa County Library District in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me today, I have Megan White. Meg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Megan White. I'm an attorney with the Maricopa County Public Defender's Office, meaning I am a criminal defense attorney.
Thank you, Meg. So Meg and I have worked together quite closely over the past years over the past year or so to work on bridging the access to justice gap. And whether you knew it or not, there actually is an issue with how people interact with the justice system, how they can resolve their justice issues, and the barriers that society and really a lot of different things, political issues, social issues, all these things are barriers so they can not resolve their justice issues. There is a lot of problems. Meg, can you tell us a little bit about some of these problems of why people can't resolve their justice issues?
Of course, and as a starting point, there's some difference between criminal law and basically all other types of law for this issue. If someone is a individual facing criminal felony charges, they actually do have some access to justice in that organizations, institutions like my own office exist, where if you can't afford an attorney, one would be provided for you. And as you can see in the bottom of the screen here, about 80% of individuals charged with felonies with violent crimes in our country's largest counties, so including places like Maricopa County, can't actually afford a defense attorney and instead have one appointed like myself. Now, for things that are not criminal, so civil law, torts, family law, divorces, things like that same ability to have counsel appointed for you doesn't exist. So unfortunately, in instances like that, individuals often either have no legal help at all or have inadequate legal help, meaning they could afford assistance for like an hour or afford assistance with one motion versus the 15 their case needed to have filed. Unfortunately, outside of just these base numbers, there are some pretty large access to justice problems. Individuals who are unhoused, for example, so homeless individuals, may not have access to any sort of phone, to any computer, any easy computer access, and may lack things like transportation. So making it to court appearances, being able to get a hold of your attorney, even if you have one, being able to reach out to your attorney, get discovery, get the evidence in your case, and have a chance to review it. If that discovery requires a computer, that may not exist for some people, just as some general access to justice issues. And COVID has made this even more difficult for individuals. Most courts in America did not fully shut down, and I truly mean fully there, during the pandemic. Instead, most courts switched to some version or limited version of using computers, using internet access, using things like Zoom, like we are right now, to continue court appearances. And outside of just court, probation offices did the exact same thing. So individuals who are low income or individuals who are unhoused suddenly had a large burden on them and that they needed access that previously they didn't necessarily need in order to have the ability to make it into court or to see their probation officer.
So we recognize that this was an issue. The public defender's office, they do community outreach, they do engagement, they go to schools to talk about what people's rights are and the laws. And so they actually reached out to the library district and they said, hey, let's do something fun. Let's like do a story time or something. And we talked to them. We said, let's take it further. Let's do an ongoing partnership. So the way our partnership works is what we did to address this, because the library, we said, we know there's a lot of stuff that the library has and that we can do to really help some of this access to justice issues, to help resolve some of these, to offer them to people in the community, and that people just don't know about them or they don't relate them to justice issues. So we worked with the public defender's office probably for about a year and a half now. And we started with webinars. So we started doing some basic live webinars. We did 6 of them. Some of them were basic know your rights things. So like in early, in the middle of 2020, there were a lot of protests going on here in Phoenix. So we did one on know your rights as a protester, like what you're allowed to do and how to interact with police if you are stopped at a protest. And they were very well attended. And then we also did ones on less less hot topic issues, and we did ones on like bicycle law and what kids need to know about, do you have to register your bicycle, do you have to, what's the law, do you have to have a light on it, things like that. So we tried to cover a range of topics, and we recognized that there was a big issue of education, and a lot of it was that people just had no idea what could be a legal issue, and once they knew it was a legal issue, they really had no idea of what their options were, how to get in touch with their legal resources. So after we did about 6 webinars, they went really well. We said, this needs to be an ongoing thing. So we actually created a podcast. And the podcast went live at, I believe, June 1st of this year. It's called Know Your Rights. And I put the website up there so you can see it. It's on Spotify and Apple, Google, all the podcast hosting sites. So we host it. We put one up once a week, every Monday. And we have covered a ton of topics. We get about 300 listens a month. It's still a new podcast, so we have very high hopes for the future. And we've covered topics like we're doing one right now on domestic violence, where we've actually crossed the adversarial line. And we have a county attorney on there, a prosecutor, talking about domestic violence and victims' rights. And, we have ones on animal cruelty and pet owners' rights and responsibilities. And we redid the protest one. And so we come up with all these topics. And we have probably about 30 different attorneys in the public defender's office who rotate these topics. Meg has done a number of episodes with me. And it's just really fantastic. The public defenders and librarians, believe it or not, are very akin in our mission. We work for the underserved and the underrepresented, and it meshes very well. And then also in the midst of our webinars and podcasts, we've done a number of community partnerships. So we've made partnerships for the podcast. So like when we did one on animal cruelty, we reached out to the Humane Society and as well as the legal diversion program that does the counseling. So we have a number of community partnerships that they've come on as a guest onto the podcast, but then that also leads to further partnerships, and it helps them to know what their legal issues are and what their options are for legal issues. So now that you know there's a problem, and that's always the first step, is actually knowing a problem is out there, how can libraries help with their existing services? So these are things that most libraries likely already have. These were things when I went into this partnership and this podcast and everything, these were things that my library had already had. And really, it's just a new way of marketing and looking at your services and recognizing that this access to justice gap is just a new gap that these library services can fit. It's a new way of marketing your library services to fill a social need. So that includes free Wi-Fi and computers. My library's Wi-Fi is on 6 a.m. to 11 at night. They can access it from the parking lot if they need to, even when the library's closed. We have public computers, so people can come in here, they can go onto a computer and they can print off their court forms. Our particular district has loanable Chromebooks and Hotspots. So if people are unable to have their technology, especially during COVID when all the court cases went online and everything, and even like their counseling sessions as part of their probation, all that stuff went online. If they didn't have the technology, they could come rent a Chromebook or a hotspot from the library and do this from the privacy of their own home or their car or wherever they were. Some of our libraries have private study rooms. So if they didn't have a private space, if they were at a shelter, they could come book a private study room and do their counseling in the study room. Libraries, public libraries, academic libraries, they have legal resources. So you probably have books. We are a public library here, so we have all the NOLO guide books. So we've got, everyday law for landlords, those type of things. But we also have online resources. So we have, court forms, there are legal books, there are ebooks, there are a lot of things that libraries have access to that people often don't know. And the last thing I want to mention is something that people don't often think about when they think about library services. It's library staff expertise. So even though people might have a phone and they have a court hearing, our court hearings here in Maricopa County use Microsoft Teams. Most of the people that I have come into the library have no idea how to use that. So I personally had a gentleman come into the front desk and said, I have a court hearing in 15 minutes. And he handed me his phone and said, help me. Those are the people who have this access to justice gap, who have this legal need, and they have no idea how to get from here to there. So all the librarians, we use our knowledge on technology, on how to download Microsoft Teams, on, finding someone if we didn't have a bookable study room, maybe you could find a quiet corner for this person. Maybe you have earbuds that you can loan out or give out, or you could find a quiet place. So there are a lot of things that come with the librarian's expertise that you don't think about that can help for this access to justice. Meg, can you think of anything that I didn't touch on this one?
It's on there briefly, but the online court forms, most, at least of the counties, will have some version of online self-service for the courts, criminal, family, civil. Those forms are a huge deal for individuals. The idea of just being able to quickly log on and print something that you're going to need for your case from the library versus have someone who has no transportation have to find a way to court to wait in line for a couple hours to get that same form, that's huge.
Absolutely. Now, those are things that you probably already have, but there are new ways that you can help that you hadn't done before. So you can do legal education outreach, just like this podcast. You can partner with a law library or a public defender's office or a local attorney, someone who could do legal education. So legal education, I do want to make a quick differentiation. Legal education is not legal representation. So we're, in our podcast and our webinars, we are not giving people legal advice. We're not saying, yes, say this, don't say that, do this. We're saying, in general, this is the law, this is the general way that it plays out, these are your options. So legal education is okay to give. We do not recommend giving legal advice because I am not an attorney, and even attorneys on the podcast, they're not in an attorney-client relationship. So we stay away from legal advice, and it just falls under legal education. One of the new things that a lot of libraries are working on is reentry services. So people who are recently incarcerated and they're just getting out. What can libraries do to partner with maybe the jails and prisons and the Department of Corrections of your particular state or county to make sure that people who are just getting out of jail have access to a library card? Do you have job resources that these people might need? Do you have resume help? Do you have all your resources that we put on? We're like, we've got live job help and we've got this resume builder. The people who really need it are people who are recently incarcerated, who are trying to build back their lives.
Reaching out to partner with probation would also be very helpful there. A lot of individuals starting probation may have recently left jail or may just be unemployed and in a position where those same services would be a huge, huge help for them.
And one more note on that probation, we're working on right now is allowing people who are on probation, because they have to call a phone number every day to see if they are going to be drug tested that day. So if they don't have a phone, they have to find a phone. So one option we're still working on, it's a work in progress, but maybe they can come into your library and just use your public phone. They can call the probation line, see if they have the drug test or not. That is actually, believe it or not, a huge service for people who don't have phones. Because really, we want people on probation. We want them to go get their testing. We want them to be successful in their probation. And if they don't have the phone or the ability to fulfill all the terms of their probation, then that just increases recidivism, and we don't want that. Another option is to work on your services with prisons and jails. So people who are still incarcerated. Maricopa County, we actually run our summer reading program in the local jails here. So we do it in the jails for adults, as well as this was the first year we did it in the juvenile detention center for juveniles. So what we did for that was the county, we bought a bulk shipment of books, because when you succeed at the summer reading program, you get a free book at the end. So we had a bulk shipment of books sent to the juvenile detention center, and then juveniles who were successful in their reading program, they got one of the free books. So those type of services are really hugely important for libraries. And they fit so well into library mission about serving the underserved and, making sure information is accessible and equitable. And then there's outreach, partnerships. There's a million new things that you can do, but it doesn't have to be new. Like I said, you have a lot of services now that you can probably use. A lot of it, we say this all the time when you're like interviewing for a job, it's all about how you spin it. Well, for libraries and your services, you can spin almost anything to work as an access to justice issue. Now, there's a ton of resources about access to justice. If it's new to you, or if you're not sure exactly what it means, it is a huge, huge topic. And it's not just here in the US. It is worldwide. There's a UN access to justice committee. There are state committees. You can go online. There's the American Bar Association. They talk about human rights and access to justice. Legal Services Corporation, they put out a justice gap report, and that's where they specifically look at civil litigation. The World Justice Project talks about the world. So, in America, we talk a lot, here in the US, we talk a lot about the social issues and, people don't have transportation, but worldwide, there's a lot of people who are just completely excluded from the justice system. Like they don't have any options at all. So there are a lot more issues than just the few that I've mentioned here. They're very specific to Arizona, to the US, but worldwide, the justice gap is real. So I've put some recommended resources here. I do recommend all of those. And the first things, if you want to get started on down this road, having your library make steps to mitigate the access to justice gap, you don't have to do much. You can research, you can just reach out to your local public defenders, reach out to attorneys, reach out to Department of Corrections, see who in your community is already helping these people and see how you can partner with them, find out what they need. It's an easy first step because you already have a lot of services that will help mitigate the justice gap. Meg, did you have anything to add?
Just that I love the idea of reaching out to organizations like my own. We definitely want to hear from the library. We want to know that there are other organizations that want to help our clients.
And, I did want to mention, because we have a group of about 30 attorneys in the public defender's office here who work on this project with us. Every single attorney that we have reached out to, whether it's in our county, whether it's in a different county, whether, we had an attorney from Lambda Legal in New York, every single attorney was like, this is fantastic. Everyone needs to know this legal information. You are very unlikely to hit resistance with any sort of project like this, especially in the legal world, because they're like, yes, please get this information out to people. People need to know what their rights are. They need to know what their legal options are. So it's kind of, on the one hand, it's kind of an easy lift for libraries. But on the other hand, it does require that you know what the issue is. You do need to do some research. You do need to find out who in your community is already working on this. If there's nonprofits, here in Phoenix, we have a lot of nonprofits who already work on these issues. They help the indigent population with their legal issues. We have community legal services. And, there's a lot of pro bono legal services, and ASU here even has like legal clinics. One of the biggest things recently here in Arizona was the legalization of marijuana. Like that's been really, really huge. And we are working on like this big 5-episode series, but there is a big movement here. So you can find out, who's putting on free clinics, free legal clinics, letting people know what their options are and their rights are. And these are really important things. So find out who your allies are in the community and reach out to them. And that is the absolute best way to get started. Personally, I do highly recommend the podcast format. It's easy, it's accessible. It's a very low lift technologically. So expense-wise, it does not take a lot of money and it's a lot more accessible than websites. So I highly recommend the podcast. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I would love to open it up to questions.
So we've collected some. This is a later question, but I'm sure it's on everyone's mind. Will you be sending participants the slides after this presentation?
Yes, so I did send the slides in, so you'll be getting the slides with I believe with the recording.
Great. Another question was, do you also provide services for small businesses, startups, nonprofits, especially with so many regulatory changes due to COVID, as well as labor issues?
That's a great question. So yes, I mean, libraries, we can do a lot of stuff like this. So my library personally here, our district, we have like a small business startup software that it's free to anyone, right? And they can log in. It's got this whole dashboard, write a business plan. So that's one option. It's got legal issue. It's got like legal things that entrepreneurs need to know. We can do podcast episodes about like employment law. We can do one about like disability in the workplace for employers. So there's a lot of different facets to small businesses and other like community nonprofits that you can help with. And it's really about just finding out what services you already have and just leveraging them for different options.
Another question is, podcasts, are they better than webinars since they can be listened to from a phone rather than needing a computer?
I think they are. They're quite a bit more accessible. To be fair, though, there's still a gap for podcasts when it comes to deaf and hard of hearing people. That is something that is known in the podcast world. Most podcasts, to be fully accessible, you should provide transcripts or show notes. Also provide it in text, do what you can. So that's something that we're still working on, is getting our podcasts fully accessible. But yes, podcasts are generally more accessible than webinars, as long as you remember to try and make it still accessible for deaf and the hard of hearing.
Have you noticed that people still aren't able to connect even though they can access a Chromebook? I know there are issues with connecting to Zoom through Chromebooks. Do the hotspots help with this?
Not really. Usually when people have trouble connecting, it's usually a lack of knowledge, technological knowledge. So having better internet, better technology typically doesn't help them very much if they don't understand fully how to navigate the internet. If they don't understand how to download an app, a Chromebook's not going to do too much help for them. So part of that is how librarians need to market their knowledge and their expertise on, helping people navigate a Chromebook, how to download apps on your phone, intro to Microsoft Teams. So find out what technology your court system is using, and you can specifically put something out, even if it's just a handout on, hey, this is what the court system's using. This is how you download it and create an account.
Perfect. So what about when someone comes in and wants you to fill in the form yourself for them?
So that's always a tricky line that we walk as librarians. So they can come in and they can talk about their court forms. They do that for job applications too. They say, here, help me with this. And we can help to an extent. So we can help them, understand the terminology and understand, if they say, well, it says I need to upload my, resume. How do I make a resume? We can help them with that. So you typically walk that fine line of helping someone, giving them information about how to fill out the form without actually saying, type this in this particular field. It is a very fine line that we walk as librarians.
My system is very suburban. What issues are most needing help?
Meg, did you want to address this one?
Just very briefly on the last one, as far as court forms, there's a good chance that if there is some sort of self-service form online, there will also be some sort of description of how to utilize that form. If you're being asked by someone to help them fill in the form, there's a good chance they did not print out that description for themselves already. So there may just be another step in research that was missed in between.
Yes.
So just that question again, do we know about like what are hot issues in suburban areas in
That's right.
this area?
The hottest issues here in Maricopa County that we found recently is actually it was the we have a big issue with transportation here because we're the 5th largest county in the US. So we're so spread out and we have not a great bus system. If you're on the outskirts of Phoenix, there is not particularly any easy way to get downtown. I personally live on the outskirts. It takes me 45 minutes to drive to downtown Phoenix. So if you're driving from, one side of the Phoenix to the other, it can take an hour and a half. And if you don't have a car, there's no particular one bus line that goes straight through. So transportation, I have a feeling, is probably our biggest issue. I know it is for the libraries, at least.
That was the last question. There was some comments like in Alabama, some counties call the same form different names.
Yes. Sometimes the forms, they can be named differently. Sometimes I've had people come into the library and say, I need a mental health power of attorney. And sometimes they might be calling it like a colloquial name or, something that someone said they needed. Or there's a couple of court forms that have very similar names. So I think of ones that have like transfer guardianship of a minor. There's a few different forms that are very similar. So I have a feeling that that's where people get confused. And in that case, your best bet is to go online because like Meg said, there's usually an explanation for each form. So just make sure that it's the exact form that they need.
Another comment is that it's infuriating that returning citizens are not provided basic cell so that allows them to make required calls. The total cost is at $50 for the first month, 15 months thereafter.
Yeah, and it is very expensive.
The last comment is just a recommendation to try and partner with local law libraries, law schools, or even state law libraries.
Yes. So, your local law library, your law school likely has student law associations. So for our cannabis series, we are partnering with the ASU Cannabis Law Society. So find the legal resources in your community because they will absolutely love to partner with the library. I can almost guarantee it.
Reaching out to the local law schools, law libraries, and even the state bar for your state is always a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all the questions and comments. There is one last one about Michigan having a legal help site.
Yeah, most states will have a legal help site. It's usually in conjunction with your state law library. I know ours is. So double check with your state law library. They usually have some sort of information where they have their court forms and they might even put on legal education things that you could partner with. So double check your state law library because they're probably the best route. And if you have further questions, you're welcome to email me. My email is just my name, Laura Francabandera @mcldaz.org. So you're always welcome to email me. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.